We are in the middle of studying Pirkei Avot, or some would say Pirkei Avos. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddush shanu b'mitzvah v'tzavanu la'asoch debrivei Torah. There is a verse here that is said before every chapter we read, and this is from Sanhedrin 90a and Isaiah 60. All Israel have a share in the world to come. As it is said, your people are all righteous. They shall inherit the land forever. They are a shoot of my own planting, a work of my own hands, that I may be glorified. Good Shabbos, Rebbitzin. All right, so kind of get us back into the framework, right? We are studying Pirkei Avot, chapters of the fathers, ethics of the fathers. So we are starting chapter 2. And so we want to remember that this is in the Mishnah, which was written down, redacted, which I understand what they're saying by redacted, but in today's vernacular, it means something different. By Yehuda HaNasi, Yehuda the Prince, and we kind of discussed that history last week. We want to kind of talk about what chapter 2 is going to be like. However, I am going to go back to chapter 1 for one of the sayings by a particular sage. But we want to remember that this is not about like law or specific commandments per se. This is about teachings by the sages in the past. And when we say in the past, we're talking about 200 CE that way, right? So we're not, when I say that way, into the past, considering that this book was written down in around 200 CE when the rest of the Mishnah was written down. Okay, just so we're not necessarily going to talk about individual mitzvot, and so, but there's mitzvot involved in everything that these sages are going to talk about. So I'm going to go back to chapter 1, okay, and when we talked about chapter 1 and chapter 2, we have to remember that this is kind of a chronology for the most part ish. When we're talking about the chronology from Moshe all the way through to Yehuda HaNasi in time in between. Okay. All right. So when we go back to chapter 1 real fast, and the reason why I'm doing this is I'm bringing up a name that for some may seem, that we know, right? And I think I should do a study on this particular sage. His name is Rabban Gamliel, the Elder. Now, this name should sound familiar if you've read the Brit Hadashah. He is the teacher of one famous Jewish man by the name of Shaul or Paul. Okay, he's also was the Nasi of the Sanhedrin in the book of Acts when Kepha and Yochanan, Peter and John, were brought before the Sanhedrin, and he's the one that said, leave these alone. And if it is from Hashem, then it will last. If it's not from Hashem, it will die, just like every other movement that came across. Okay. So I will go to chapter 1, verse or Pasuk 16. It says, Rabban Gamliel, now this is Gamliel the elder, right? Because we're going to run into another Gamliel later. Okay, this is Rabban Gamliel the elder. Used to say, get yourself a teacher Avoid doubt and do not make a habit of giving tithes by guessing. So, get yourself a teacher. Get yourself a rabbi. Rabbi, teacher, right? Get yourself somebody who teaches. And we're talking about get yourself a teacher that actually knows what he's talking about, right? Don't get somebody who doesn't know what he's talking about, right? That's not necessarily a teacher. When Gamaliel is saying, get yourself a teacher, Shaul got himself a teacher. Who was that? Rabban Gamaliel, right? He got him, that's it. That was his teacher. Now, was Shaul the only student of Gamaliel? No, he had thousands of students. And as the Nasi of the Sanhedrin, even more so, he had many students. And we'll also have to understand that it is taught, and traditionally the view is held, that Gamaliel is the grandson of Hillel, from Hillel and Shammai. Now, if you know Hillel, we haven't really talked about him that much, and we're not going to talk about him that much, but he is from the, from the lineage of David. So it's interesting. Okay. So get yourself a teacher. Avoid doubt. Okay, so know your stuff. And do not make a habit of giving tithes by guessing. What does that mean? Be particular. Know when you specifically, when he's talking about here is like giving tithes to who? Or to what? The temple, right? We're talking about the temple. The temple was up when he was alive. And he was alive when the temple was not up. He actually was alive during the destruction as well. So, at least, I believe he was, yes. So, when he's talking about giving tithes, he's like, be specific. Actually do the math when you're giving tithes. All right, just wanted to make that point. We're now going to go into chapter 2, starting at point 1. Rabbi, now in our Sidors the Koran Sidor that we're reading this from, it has in brackets Judah the Prince, or Yehuda HaNasi. It says that because in the Mishnah, it doesn't necessarily say who Rabbi or Rebbe, as some would say, is. In the Mishnah, and even in the Gemara, when you just see the word Rabbi, Rabbi said this, Rabbi said that, that is Yehuda HaNasi. He is Rabbi, period. Okay. So Rabbi, Judah the Prince, said, what is the right path a person should choose for himself? Whatever is honorable to one who chooses it, and honorable in the eyes of others. Be as meticulous in the observance of a minor mitzvah as a major one, for you do not know the reward for each mitzvah. Against the loss that fulfilling a mitzvah may entail, reckon its reward. Against the benefit a transgression may bring, reckon the loss it involves. Reflect on 3 things, and you will not fall into transgression. Transgression meaning sin. Yes. Know what is above you, a seeing eye, a hearing ear, and a book in which all your deeds are written. All right, so this is a pretty long one. So what is he saying here when he's talking about me being meticulous in the observance of a minor mitzvah as a major one? For you do not know the reward for each mitzvah. Make sure you were doing it with the right heart. Yes.
All Torah is important.
All Torah is important. Okay.
Know what is necessarily major and minor in the eyes of God. A widow giving a mite.
Right.
Seems a minor mitzvah, but it was a big thing.
Right.
So,
It's hard to know. And when we know, so we'll go with what you're saying as far as a minor and a major. There are such things, right? Yeshua mentioned you guys are meticulous in the minor and neglect the major. So there are such things as major and minor mitzvah. So what is the key word that Yehuda Hanasi is trying to say here? Do them all, right? But we don't know the reward that we're going to get for whatever mitzvah we do. We don't know. Torah does not tell us specific rewards for each mitzvah. Okay? Torah does tell us, a lot of times what the negative part is. If you don't do a mitzvah, if you sin, it tells you, but it doesn't really give us specific rewards, right? You'll be blessed if you follow Torah. That's about it, right? What do we know? You'll choose life, right? And so the sages will talk about this, right? So the sages is, okay, here in my book, the Breslov edition of Pirkei Avot, it says here, God did not reveal the reward assigned to each mitzvah so that people would not concentrate on the mitzvot whose rewards are great and neglect the others. Right? So if you're looking at, say, hey, well, I will get a greater reward for myself if, I eat pork versus some other minor mitzvah of tithing mint and dill. That and what Yeshua made mention to, right? Because tithing mint, reward, not eating pork. Yes, if I misspoke, apologize for that. Yeah, sorry about that. Not eating pork. We'll make sure. Yeah, we don't. No, we don't eat pork.
I think of when he said, you say, well, this is dedicated to the temple to get out of taking care of your parents.
Dedicating to the temple to get out of taking care of your parents, right? Right, choosing one over the other, because they say, well, I get a greater reward for giving to the temple versus taking care of my parents. Okay, that's good. I like that one. So we don't know what, right? And when I say tithing mint and dill, that's not in Torah either. Tithing spices, that is more. But is it wrong to? And the answer is no. So that's what, Yehuda is trying to say here. Right, and when they're saying weigh the loss of a mitzvah against its reward and the reward of a transgression against the loss it entails, the price of a mitzvah, whether calculated in financial loss or otherwise, is incomparable to the reward that you will receive in the world to come. We just don't know what that reward is, right? And this is taken from Bartenura, who did a commentary in Pirkei Avot. Nevertheless, observes Rabbi Israel Salanter, even if Gehenom were the reward for a mitzvah and the Garden of Eden were the reward for a sin, it would still be wiser to pursue a mitzvah. And that's loaded. That's a good phrase. We're not going to go into that one too much.
Well, let me ask you this, if I may. Rabbi Bernstein taught, and I'm kicking around what the difference is between reward and merit.
Okay.
He taught very strongly that the merit that we do is all assigned to Israel.
The merit we do is assigned to Israel,
It
yes.
isn't that I'm going to get anything. It's that even more so, what I do is going to be applied in a different entity altogether, which to me created a stronger mental anguish in some sense, because I could say, well, I'm not doing it for myself. I'm going to step to a higher level of purpose. What I do now is not really about me at all. It's that how am I going to affect?
Right.
And of course, he always anchored that with the return of Messiah.
So
Peter says in his writing that, to hasten the day, well, we should be busy doing these things that will we're the ones that are more in control of bringing Messiah back. So the difference between merit and reward,
Right.
I will
Right.
cast it at your feet.
Merit and reward. Well, especially when
In
we're
this
talking about
realm.
in this realm. So when we're talking about, biblically from the Tanakh point of view, there is, and from Yeshua himself in the book of Revelation, there's a reward, whatever it is. We don't know what it is, nor should we focus on that. We should focus on doing a mitzvah. Why? Because it's a mitzvah. That's it. And the mitzvah we do, we get zachut or merit for Israel. This merit goes into, I think Rabbi Bernstein mentioned, into like a bucket, right? And when this bucket is full, Mashiach returns, right? And that's the idea. So, and that goes with the idea of what Andrew is saying is like the right heart. You're doing it with the right heart. I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this for who? I'm doing this for Hashem. And by the way, since I'm doing this for Hashem, it adds merit to Israel. Right now, what happens in the world to come? Eyes has not seen, ears not heard.
Does it matter?
Does it matter? And the answer is no. Right? Hashem will give us the reward. Okay. So the idea is don't focus on the reward. That's why Torah doesn't give us rewards. We do mitzvot because they're mitzvot, no matter what status or importance.
Does any other commandment besides obeying your parents, honoring your father and mother, have a reward?
Well, does it? I
I
mean,
can't think of any.
I mean, when you're talking about Torah, or you'll live a long life.
Yeah, that's a blessing.
That's a blessing, right? And so, but when we're talking about reward here, was this reward here on this earth, or is this in the world to come? That the sages discuss that a lot. So we're not going to go into that. But reflect on the three things, and you will not fall into transgression. Right? So these three things: know what or who is above you. Right? Who is above you? Right? I see an eye, a hear an ear. Right? Hashem sees all, he hears all. Right? Yeshua made mention that all the idle words that have been said will be brought back. In a book in which all your deeds are written. Does that sound familiar in the book of Revelation? All the books were open? Yeah. Something like that. Number 2. Rabban Gamliel, son of Rabbi Yehuda the Prince. Now, this is a different Gamliel. This is Gamliel the second. Said, it is good to combine Torah study with a worldly occupation, for the effort involved in both makes one forget sin. Torah study without an occupation will in the end fail and lead to sin. And all who work for the community should do so for the sake of heaven, for their ancestral merit will support them, the merit of the fathers, and their righteousness endures forever. As for you, God will say, I will count you worthy of great reward as though you yourselves have accomplished it all. Okay. Does that sound like pretty much self-explanatory? Do we get that? We shouldn't just be what Rabban Gamliel II is saying. We should have a job, occupation outside of Torah study. We should have both. And that would keep us busy enough not to sin. Right. Keep us out of trouble. So when we're talking about this in the Breslov edition, Rabbi Nosson say the main difficulty in earning a living consists in not having the right advice. We don't know in which path to take in business dealings in order to earn a profit, but even if we were to have the right advice in order to prosper, this will not be sufficient unless we plan to use the money in a holy manner by giving charity, tzedakah, and rejoicing in our lot, and not by greedily pursuing more wealth and constantly craving more. On the contrary, when we are experiencing financial success, we should increase our devotions and our attachment to God. Our material pursuits must be for the sake of the Torah. As the Mishnah states, it is good to combine Torah study with a worldly occupation, which when God leads us to the right business decisions, we use our gains to do his will, then the advice we receive can be considered good advice, and we will attain true and eternal success. Okay. And this is from Likotei Halachot, Sukkah 7, 6 through 7. Okay. The effort required for both causes sin to be forgotten, okay? Both Torah and a worldly involvement or a worldly occupation are necessary. Torah because it is, I'm trying to make sure why it seems like it skips. Okay, Torah because it is your life and the length of your days, and worldly involvement because by engaging in business or work we gain success to the gratuitous kindness with which God sustained the world prior to the giving of the Torah. Okay. All right. Number 3. Be wary in your dealings with the ruling power. This is still Rabban Gamliel II. For they only befriend a man when it serves their needs. When it is to their advantage, they appear as friends, but they do not stand by a person in his hour of need.
Yep.
Politicians?
Yeah.
No.
They haven't changed at all.
They haven't changed at all. I mean, we're talking about, this is 200 CE round time there. They're talking about it.
That applies right now.
That applies, that applies right now. So that's
Well, people are people.
people, yeah. Government powers are government powers. Yeah, that's number 4.
Yeah, don't put your faith in man, that's for sure.
He used to say, and this is Rabban Gamliel, he used to say, do his will as if it were yours, so that he may do your will as if it were his. Set aside your will for the sake of his, that he may set aside the will of others before yours. Does that make sense? Kind of? Right, so when we are supposed to do his will. And so that we may, so if we're in conjunction with Hashem, right, if we do his will, our will is to do his will, so therefore his will is being done through us, so, okay. And set aside your will for the sake of his, right, set aside yourself for Hashem, so that he may set aside the will of others before yours, okay? When you nullify your will before his will, and this is a different way of saying it, set aside or nullify, okay? Well, let me go back, right? And this is the Breslov edition here. Do his will as if it were your own will. That is, fulfill God's will with eagerness and devotion, so that he may do your will as if it were his will, okay? In fulfillment of his true desire to benefit his creatures. And another interpretation, Devar Acher, Merari translates this teaching, and this is a sage, translates this teaching as, so that he may render your will as if it were his will, and thus enable you to create harmony between the divine will and your will. Okay, and this is from Bet Haberacha. The reward for doing God's will as if it were your own is profound spiritual transformation. You will be transformed from an ego-centered person to a God-centered person. Okay, and then conversely, nullifying your will before his will so that he may nullify the will of others before your will. The previous statement refers to the positive commandments, in other words, the doing of the actually doing his will, right? And this statement refers to the negative commandments. Okay. Right, so do the positive commandments and negative commandments. Does that make sense? So when you look at it here, set aside your will for the sake of his, right? So don't do the negative commandments so that he may set aside the wills of others. Okay. I mean, all these teachings we can go into way deeper. All right.
Well, the simplest application I can think of at the moment is Yeshua told the disciples when he was teaching them about prayer. He said, "Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." The human has to come to understand or learn via through the Torah, well, what's going on in heaven? If we don't know what's going on here, how are we duplicating it here? Thus the study of Torah and the commandments. Those are the things in my mind that shows me what his will is, because Torah is functioning quite healthily in heaven.
Well, yes, Torah in
so
heaven is correct.
If we're learning the Torah, the mitzvahs, and we're doing them, that's how we then make that succinct connect to what Yeshua said. Then we'll be doing whatever's
Right.
going on in heaven, it's going to be going on here.
Right, right. So God's will is what? Torah. Right.
There's no other application. You can't. I haven't been able to find anybody can say, well, no, doing something else would be equal to knowing what's going on in heaven. It's the only thing I can make a deduction of.
Right. Number 5. Hillel said, right, in this Hillel, we've talked, this is the Hillel prior to Yeshua, right? Hillel and Shammai. And remember, Hillel was a Nasi, head of the Sanhedrin. Yes. Hillel said, do not separate yourself from the community. Do not be sure of yourself until the day you die. Do not judge your fellow until you have stood in his place. Do not say anything that cannot be understood at once in the hope that it will eventually be understood. And do not say, I will study when I have time. You may never have the time. Okay, so don't lone wolf it. Don't be a lone wolf. Be with the community. Community is important. We know, right? And this has been taught for centuries, for thousands of years. Always be with the community. The reason why Israel has, been together as a nation is Torah and community, right? They follow Torah in the community. Like you have these in the exile in Babylon, in Babel. They would have communities within the areas of the kingdom, right? And it's also the same moving forward as well. They would have communities after the destruction of the second temple. You would have communities. You had Yavne, and you had communities in the Galilee. You had communities in Babel or in the Babylon area, and then you would have communities in Egypt as well. Okay. As well as then, as you can read through the Brit Hadashah, they had communities through the Galut, through the diaspora, right? And they still do. Right, right. Okay.
Think about New Jersey, think about New York.
New Jersey, New York.
Miami.
That's true. Yeah, and they stay as communities, which
Yes.
community is necessary. And this is Hillel saying this back, around,
646.
well, it was about 2,000 years ago, actually. He said,
So was Hillel and Shammai before Yehuda?
yes, yes. He jumped back in this mission, Mishnah. They kind of jumped back to what Hillel said, It's probably in concordance of what's being taught in this chapter. But yes, Hillel was 3 generations back from Yehuda HaNasi.
So was he after the time of Christ, or was he present during
Who's he?
Yehuda?
Yehuda HaNasi was not alive during Yeshua's ministry and life. Yehuda HaNasi was later. Yehuda HaNasi was post-destruction
Okay.
of the temple. So if you want to use that as a demarcation, Yehuda HaNasi was he was 200 when he wrote down, so he was alive prior to 200 CE. So
are these organized in any way? Like is chapter 2 a grouping of a theme?
not that I picked up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't. There may be a theme. They're just maybe the teachings that they're trying to do. He formulated in a way to kind of go within this theme.
Their teachings overall would have been encapsulated that way, but here they pulled out key nuggets
Sure.
and placed them in here.
Right. So don't be sure of yourself until the day you die. So what does that mean? What is some of the translation? Let me see that.
That means I sit here confused.
You,
Means we can always
Oh.
screw up. Don't think we're
Okay.
perfect in the meantime.
right.
We're in the Siddur.
Okay. All right. Still in chapter 2. Okay. So let's see here. This Pirkei Avot is a little bit different, huh?
Yeah, we got 4 and 5.
Number 5.
4 and 5 are different in this Siddur. Okay, let me see here.
We just worded differently.
Right.
Separated.
The separation is different. So 4 in Sepharia, just kind of note this is what we're discussing. 4 is longer, meaning to say that 4 and 5 in our Siddur are combined. It seems like here. So I'll say this. This is the Sepharia edition. Okay, this is. He used to say, "Do His will," and though it was set aside as it were your will. We've read that before. This is 4, so that He will do your will as though it were His. Set aside your will in the face of His will, so that He may set aside the will of others for the sake of your will. Right now, Hillel. This is R5 in the Siddur, and this is still 4 in like Sepharia, as well as it is still 4 in the Breslov edition. Okay. But I'll say this translation since I'm with it. Do not separate yourself from the community. Do not trust in yourself until the day of your death. Do not judge your fellow man until you've reached his place. And do not say something that cannot be understood. In the end, it will be understood. Say not, when I shall have leisure, I shall study. Perhaps you will not have leisure. Okay. All right. Yeah, it seems like 4 and 5 were combined in the Breslov and the Sepharia edition. In the Koran Siddur, they separated 4 and 5. I see your confusion. It is confusing. But they're still both here. So it's just the numbering is different. So when you're saying here, in regards to do not say something that cannot be understood. Well, actually, let me go back. Do not trust yourself unto the day of your death. What does this say? In the Breslov edition, it is saying here, do not rely on your righteousness and think that you cannot stumble. For Yochanan, the Kohen, Gadol, or John the High Priest, is in English, served for 80 years, yet in the end he became a Sadducee who denied the oral law. That's from Berachot 29a. Okay. So don't rely on yourself. Okay. And do not say something that cannot be understood, assuming that eventually it will be understood. Rather, strive to express your thoughts clearly so your words need no further clarification, which I need practice on.
We all do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we talk to anybody outside our fellowship, especially the Christendom, I
Yes.
have an idea what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
it's a waste of time. I've discovered that for myself. I go,
Right.
"No,
So,
they have nothing to plan it to."
yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so the idea of when I have spare time, I will study, for you may never have spare time or leisure time. So what is this saying? When I get a break, I'll study. Will you get a break? Well, there ain't no saying you're going to get one. Right? Set a time to study. And this is what Shammai says. Shammai, who we discussed, Hillel and Shammai. Okay. As Shammai taught, and this is in Avot 1:15, back to chapter 1. He said, you must set aside fixed times for Torah study, or else you may come to the end of your life without having studying Torah. Okay? Even communal leaders and busy people who can spare only 15 minutes here and there in the course of their day should know that such modest efforts are meaningful and add up to something of worth. For the optimal time for Torah study may never arrive. And that's from Tiferet Yisrael. All right. Now, moving on to R6, and for some of those that are following, Mishnah 5 in some other translations, is trying not to cause even more confusion. He used to say this, meaning Hillel, right? He used to say, an uncouth person cannot be sin-fearing, nor can an ignoramus be pious. A shy person cannot learn, nor can an impatient one teach. A person overoccupied in business does not always become wise. In a place where there are no worthy people, strive to be worthy. Right? In some translations will say a boor cannot fear sin.
Mine says a brute.
A brute. Because he cannot even recognize evil and does not know what to avoid. Nor can an unlearned person be pious. And I'm reading from the Breslov edition. For he lacks Torah learning, even though he is knowledgeable in the ways of the world, unlike the brute, unlike the boor, unlike the uncouth person. He may be upright, but his virtues, lacking a foundation in Torah, inevitably, big word, will be faulty. Okay, a bashful person cannot learn. And this is the Talmud states this: he who is willing to look foolish in order to learn Torah will ultimately become great in Torah. That affects me per se. There's some people in this world say we look foolish in studying Torah. Like those in a body Messiah would say so. Some in a body Messiah would say such. Right? He who remains silent and does not ask for fear of embarrassment will remain without knowledge. And this is from Berachot 63b. Right? Nor can an impatient person teach. If a teacher is too strict, his students will be afraid to ask questions and will remain unenlightened. Right? You don't want to Yeah. Patience. As Rabbi Bernstein, may his holy name be blessed, was when teaching, he was really good on the patience because right here, me poking him. And,
He would say to you, why would you say that?
yeah, why would I say that? Yeah, I don't know why I said that. I don't know, but yes.
But you can't be shy and learn, so you
I
gotta
can't.
be willing to ask.
Right. No, you got to be willing to ask. Oh, I was willing to ask all the time, but yeah. Yeah, no, they
Yeah,
get it.
but we just had a week of beating this subject. Is there's 4 kids gotta ask questions. That is the premise of the starting point.
With the 4
Ask
questions.
a question.
Here, the 4
Smart
questions.
guy, dumb guy, unable to answer guy, I don't have to ask the question.
We're talking
Ask the
about
question.
Pesach and the asking of questions by the children. Which, by the way, shameless plug, there is a video on our YouTube channel in regards to the 4 sons from Rabbi Bernstein.
We'll be seeing just a snippet of it today.
Oh, we're going to be talking about it today? Nice, I like that.
I'm glad you brought up the 4 questions. I mean, it fits great.
The 4 questions, yes, it does. So, moving on, not everyone who succeeds in business becomes wise. Indeed, if one who is too deeply involved with business cannot become a scholar, right? You can have an occupation, as the previous mission has stated, or the Pasuk, right? But if you're too much in business and not studying Torah, that's a bad thing too, right? There is
A business can become an idol.
a business, yes, a business can become an idol. It can become, there can be an imbalance there, and we need to have a balance. Okay. So, in a place where there are no worthy people, strive to be worthy.
Mine says, in a place where there are no men, strive to be a man.
In a place where there are no men, strive to be a man. Uh-huh. Yep, that says that in the Breslov edition too. Nice. Okay. Make sure I'm missing anything. All right. Next page. This is an interesting one. Okay. Once he, and this is Hillel, he saw a skull floating on the water, and he said, because you drowned others, they drown you, and those who drowned you will themselves eventually be drowned. That's a saying. Okay. All right. So
Anything can't be easily understood.
nothing can be easily understood, right?
I just think about what you sow, you reap.
Right. Exactly. So here is what the Breslov would say, right? Because you drowned others, you were drowned, and ultimately those who drowned you will themselves be drowned. God caused you to be murdered because divine retribution is brought about through the guilty, and your murderers in turn will be called to account by God, as it is written, for he repays a man according to his actions and recompenses him according to his conduct. This is Job 34:11. In a similar vein, our sages have observed, a man is measured according to the measure he uses for others. It's from Sanhedrin 90a. So this is the idea of measure for measure. Yeshua mentions this, right? He mentions it in Matthew 18, right? The measure that you give to others, that same measurement will be brought back to you. What is it? What is it, Slade? Kaniga, Mega, Kaniga?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Never mind. Measure for measure. I'm just trying to get to Hebrew. I'm trying to connect it.
That was meant more in terms of like mercy, showing mercy and
Well,
kind
hell
of
was
stuff,
judgment.
wasn't it? Which this is the opposite.
Right. Well, no. Well, in Matthew 18, Yeshua is referring to judgment, how you're judging others. Right. Measure for measure. Okay. The Breslov edition here says this: the great 16th century Kabbalist, the Ari. That's a name. That's that's a sage. Yeah. Writes that Hillel was one of the sparks of the soul of Moses, Moshe. Thus, we find that Hillel was extremely humble, as was Moses, and he lived for 120 years, as did Moshe. The skull Hillel saw was that of Paro, or Pharaoh. Because Moses saw Pharaoh, Hillel was able to recognize the skull. This is what he saw. Right? Therefore, Hillel said, because you drowned others, that is, you drowned the Jewish children in the river, you were drowned, according to the principle of measure for measure. The Ari notes that Hillel then addressed the Jewish nation, not the skull, when he said, and ultimately those who drowned you will themselves be drowned, meaning not only Pharaoh, but any nation that oppresses you will meet a similar fate. This is based on Sha'ama Amore Razal, Avot 2, page 31. So basically, measure for measure, for judgment. Okay. Where are we at? Okay. Next one. We are at 8. We're in Mishnah 8 in our Siddur, Mishnah 7. If you're not in our Siddur, just keeping it straight here. He used to say, this is Hillel, the more flesh, the more worms. The more possessions, the more worries. The more wives, the more witchcraft. The more maidservants, the more lewdness. The more men servants, the more robbery. The more Torah, the more life. The more study, the more wisdom. The more counsel, the more understanding. The more charity, the more peace. Whoever acquires a good name requires something for himself. Whoever acquires for himself words of Torah acquires for himself life in the world to come. Okay. What is he saying here? What is it? We'll just start with the first one. The more flesh, the more worms. What do you think? The more flesh, the more worms. Think of gluttony. Basically, when you're pursuing worldly things, right? That's the idea. The more possessions, the more worry, right? And this is true. Some of the most insecure people are the richest. Always worried about somebody trying to get their wealth. Now, the more wives, the more sorcery, or the more witchcraft. This sounds kind of bad.
More manipulation, that's for sure.
Well, yes, the more, right? Who wants to be the favorite wife here, right? You get competition amongst each others, and yeah.
Is there anyone in the Bible other than the kings who had more than one wife?
Jacob,
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Good. Yeah.
right?
I think Esau did too.
Esau, you may have, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
'cause he found out his mother didn't like the one, so then he got another one.
He got another one.
Somebody else.
So,
You know,
yes.
Get rid of one and have one, but you didn't have both of them together.
He had him at the same, it
Yeah.
doesn't say he got rid of them, it said he got rid of them.
The
It just-
Faria defines that word witchcraft as seductive and corrupting influences.
Okay.
That makes sense, because everybody's vying for favor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Buying the corruptive influences.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so often they seem to take, like Esau, take women from other
Yep.
pagan nations.
Yeah.
and worship other gods, and
Right.
they come under that
Right.
influence.
Yep.
Jew is the problem,
So, and the first one, Rebbitzin would say basically fear and greed versus emunah and shalom, which is faith and peace. Okay, so now we'll go past the more wives and more sorcery. The more maidservants, the more promiscuity. Okay, that's, yeah, I mean, don't have a lot of female servants. And it's not necessarily that the owner is being promiscuous necessarily with the maidservants. It's that the maidservants influence, that type of thing. Because it's the same idea with the men servants. When you're talking about the men servants, or more robbery, right, or the more theft, right, the men servants could offer, get together and offer an influence for things like theft, robbery, so on and so forth. It's like an influential thing. Now, when we're talking about the more Torah, the more life, which Rabbi Bernstein has taught, right? Choose life, right? Which is what? That's right, and choose Torah, right? The more study, the more wisdom. This is true. And the more counsel, the more understanding. Have people to study with and have counsel. Right? Don't go by yourself. It's the community. It's the idea of community. The more charity, the more peace. Tzedakah. And whoever acquires a good name acquires something for himself, and whoever acquires for himself words of Torah acquires for himself in the world to come. Okay. The Breslov edition for the last part would say, by internalizing the words of Torah, one connects with the true goal of life, the world to come. Okay. Where are we at? 10:48. I think we'll stop here. We have a lot more to go through, but time, we got to get ready for services.
So you're saying read it on my own time and read?
Yeah, read it on your own time. Well, yeah, we should be reading it every week. Okay. Shabbat Shalom.